Have you ever been treated like you don't belong, like you're invisible in your own family? Because that was me year after year, humiliation after humiliation, until one night changed everything. It happened on my mother's birthday in front of 100 guests at one of the fanciest restaurants in town. I walked in with a small gift in my hand, only to realize my siblings had arranged a little joke at my expense. Instead of saving me a seat at the family table, they pointed me toward the corner, a table where the servers sat during their breaks, a table meant for staff, not guests. I could hear the laughter in their voices, the little whispers, the smirks. Just sit over there, it suits you. And for a moment, I swallowed the lump in my throat. I sat down, forcing myself to smile while my own family celebrated without me. But what they didn't know was that their little game was about to backfire in the most unforgettable way, because when the restaurant owner walked in, he didn't head toward them. He came straight to me. His voice carried across the room, silencing every laugh and every whisper. "Boss, so glad you could make it." And just like that, the room froze. My siblings' jaws dropped. My mother's hand clutched her glass so tight I thought it might shatter. Because at that moment, they realized the truth. I wasn't just a guest. I was the owner of the very restaurant they were sitting in. But before I tell you how I got there, let me take you back. Because this story didn't start with that birthday dinner. It started years earlier when my family decided I was the failure they could laugh at. Growing up, I always knew I was the outsider in my own family. I wasn't the golden child. That title belonged to my older sister, Melanie. She was the beauty queen, the one who won pageants, who got showered with gifts and praise. Then there was my younger brother, Chris, the baby boy, spoiled, coddled, never told no, and me. I was the one who was told I should be grateful for scraps. When Melanie needed a new dress, Mom would swipe her credit card without blinking. When Chris wanted a new gaming console, Dad would rush to the store that very evening. But when I asked for something as simple as a set of second-hand books, I'd get the same line every time. "We don't have the money for that, maybe next time." Next time rarely came. It wasn't just about material things, it was the way they spoke to me. Melanie would roll her eyes when I entered the room. Chris mimicked everything I said, twisting my words into jokes. And Mom, she'd sigh and say things like, "Why can't you be more like your sister? Look at her, graceful, beautiful, successful." The truth was, I wasn't like Melanie. I didn't care about beauty contests or flashy clothes. I wasn't like Chris either, craving constant attention. I was the quiet one, the observer, the one who noticed things others didn't. Maybe that's why they thought I was weak. I still remember one Christmas when Mom gave Melanie a sparkling necklace, Chris a brand new laptop, and me a scarf, used from her own closet. She laughed as if it were funny, but I'll never forget the sting in my chest as my siblings smirked. That night, I promised myself something. One day, I'd walk into a room and no one would ever laugh at me again. But dreams don't come easy, especially when your own family tries to convince you you're worthless. After high school, while Melanie got money for college and Chris got his tuition covered, I was told flatly, "If you want an education, you'll have to figure it out yourself." So I did. I worked part-time jobs, waitressing, cleaning, tutoring, anything to scrape by. I studied at night, exhaustion my constant companion. While my siblings lived in comfort, I learned how to survive on grit, and through it all, my family's words haunted me. Server girl, plain Jane, always chasing, never catching up. Funny thing is, those jobs, They mocked me for the ones where I wore an apron, carried trays, scrubbed floors. They became my education. I didn't just serve food. I observed how restaurants ran. I didn't just clock in and out. I watched how managers handled staff, how owners handled money, how customers responded to every detail. Where my family saw shame, I found opportunity. It started small, saving a few dollars each week, researching business basics online, taking notes while working shifts. By the time I was in my mid-20s, I had a clear picture of what it would take to run a restaurant, and a quiet fire burning inside me to prove I could. But of course, I didn't tell my family. Why would I? They would have laughed, called it impossible, said, "Stick to serving tables, it's all you're good for." So I kept my plan secret. My little dream was mine alone, a hidden seed I watered with every paycheck, every long night, every sacrifice. And years later, when that seed finally bloomed into something bigger than I could have imagined, well, that's when my family's cruelty came full circle. Because the same job they mocked me for was the reason I ended up owning the very restaurant where they thought they could humiliate me. But before we get there, you need to know just how far they went to break me down, how deep the betrayal cut. Because the birthday dinner, that wasn't the first time they tried to put me in my place. It was just the last time they ever got the chance. When I look back, I realize my family didn't just treat me like an outsider, they treated me like a servant. Every gathering, every holiday, every so-called special occasion had the same script. My siblings shinned, and I was the shadow behind them. Take my mom's 50th birthday, for example. The one before the birthday dinner. I was the one who arrived early to set up decorations, run to the bakery for the cake, and make sure the caterers knew where to unload. By the time guests arrived, I was sweaty, tired, and still in my work uniform. From my restaurant shift earlier that day, I didn't even get the chance to change. But when it came time for speeches, guess who got praised? Melanie for bringing such joy with her perfect smile, Chris for always making MOM laugh, and me. MOM thanked me for being helpful. Helpful like a maid. Helpful like staff. Not once did she acknowledge that I was the reason the whole party even happened. I smiled through it, but inside, I burned. Another time, at Christmas, Melanie gave everyone expensive gifts, designer perfume for MOM, a watch for Dad, the latest gadgets for Chris, and me. I gave handmade gifts, things I'd worked on for weeks after long shifts. A knitted sweater for Dad, a scrapbook for MOM filled with old photos I'd restored. They barely looked at them. Chris even laughed. "Wow," he said, holding the scrapbook, "a free gift. Guess we know who the cheap one is." The worst part, MOM laughed along with him. That night, I cried alone in my tiny rented room, clutching the little notebook where I scribbled my business ideas. And I swore again, one day they would choke on their laughter. But life had a way of testing me first. When I was 23, I lost my part-time job at a CAF after the place went bankrupt. I remember calling MOM, desperate, hoping maybe, just maybe, she'd offer help. Her response, "Well, maybe if you had a real career like your sister, you wouldn't have to worry about CAF jobs." That broke me in ways I can't explain. Not because she refused to help, I was used to that, but because she didn't even try to understand how hard I was fighting just to stand on my own 2 feet. Still, I refused to give up. Instead of wallowing, I took the lesson. If a CAF could go bankrupt overnight, I needed to understand why. I studied financial mistakes, supply chain problems, even customer retention. Every failure I witnessed became a blueprint of what not to do. By 25, I scraped together enough savings to buy a food truck. It wasn't much, just an old beat-up van with peeling paint and a shaky engine, but it was mine. I sold sandwiches, coffee, pastries, anything I could make cheaply and well. And you know what? People loved it. They didn't care that it wasn't fancy. They cared that I treated them like family, remembered their names, remembered their orders. Slowly, my little truck became the talk of the neighborhood. But did my family notice? Of course not. One weekend, I invited them to stop by, proud of how far I'd come. Chris showed up, looked around at the long line of customers and smirked. So you, what? A glorified sandwich girl now? Melanie giggled and added, don't forget Coffee Mate. They thought it was funny. But that day, something inside me shifted. Instead of letting their words crush me, I felt something else. A spark. Because deep down, I knew what they didn't. I was building something real. Something lasting. Something that would one day put me in a position they couldn't even dream of. I didn't argue with them. I just smiled, served my customers, and tucked away the image of their smug faces for the day I knew would eventually come, the day tables would turn. And oh, when that day came, it was more satisfying than I ever imagined. But before we get there, let me tell you about the one betrayal that nearly broke me completely, the one that made me question whether my family would ever see me as anything more than their personal punchline. Because sometimes the deepest cuts don't come from strangers. They come from the people you love the most. If I thought the little humiliations were painful, nothing compared to what happened the year I turned 26. By then, my food truck was thriving. I'd built a steady following of regular customers, office workers, college kids, even families who came every Saturday for my breakfast specials. I wasn't rich, but I wasn't struggling anymore. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was actually doing something right. That's when my family swooped in. It started innocently enough. Mom called me one afternoon, her voice unusually sweet. Honey, we're so proud of you, she said, a phrase I'd never heard from her lips before. We've been talking, and we think it's time you really grow this little business of yours. For a moment, I was stunned. Proud of me, they noticed. But then she added, you know, your sister's husband is in finance. He could help you get a real loan. Maybe we could all pitch in as partners, make this a family venture. I should have known better. But a part of me, desperate for acceptance, said yes. I agreed to let them invest. We drew up an informal deal. Melanie and her husband would handle the finances, Chris would help with marketing, and MOM would be the advisor. All I had to do was keep running the truck. At first, it seemed okay. We even talked about opening a small CAF. But then the cracks started to show. Melanie and her husband took control of the bank account, promising it was for efficiency. Suddenly, I wasn't allowed to make purchases without their approval. Chris designed ridiculous advertisements that drained money but brought no customers. MOM insisted on cutting corners, cheaper ingredients, smaller portions. I fought back, but they dismissed me. You don't understand business, Melanie sneered. Just focus on cooking. It was my business, my dream, my blood, sweat, and tears. And they hijacked it. 3 months later, the account was empty. The CAF lease fell through. Suppliers refused to deliver because payments were late. And my food truck, the one thing that was mine, was repossessed because the loan Melanie's husband took out on my behalf had defaulted. I lost everything. The night it all collapsed, I sat in my tiny apartment, staring at the empty space where my notebook full of ideas used to sit. Mom had taken it to look over. I never saw it again. I remember calling her, desperate, asking how they could let this happen. Her answer still echoes in my head. Well, maybe you just weren't cut out for this. Better to fail now before you waste more of your life. I hung up the phone and cried harder than I ever had before. Not because of the money, not even because of the truck, but because I realized the truth. My family hadn't wanted to help me succeed. They wanted to prove me wrong, to watch me fail. That night, I made another promise. If they wanted me to be a failure, I would rise so high they couldn't even reach me. And this time, I wouldn't let them anywhere near what I built. I started from scratch. Again, I took the night shifts at a small diner. I cleaned office buildings in the morning. I saved every penny, every tip, every overtime check. I lived on instant noodles and black coffee. But in my free time, I studied harder than ever. Business management, finance, real estate, hospitality trends. I devoured every book, every article, every podcast I could get my hands on. And slowly, painfully, I crawled my way back. It would take years. Years of sacrifice, silence and secrets. But brick by brick, I rebuilt not just my dream, but myself. And when I finally rose again, I rose as someone my family would never see coming. Someone they would one day regret underestimating. Because the very humiliation they used to destroy me became the fire that made me unstoppable. And it all came to a head on Mom's birthday, the night they tried one last time to humiliate me, only to discover I was no longer the girl they could push aside. The funny thing about losing everything is that it teaches you what really matters. When my family stole my first business, I thought I'd lost my dream, but what I really lost was my fear. From then on, I had nothing to prove to them, only to myself. I worked like a shadow, invisible, but relentless. By day, I juggled to part-time jobs. By night, I scoured online forums about small business ownership, studied restaurant operations, and even took free accounting classes. I wasn't just learning how to run a kitchen, I was learning how to run an empire. My big break came when I met Rosa, the owner of the diner where I worked night shifts. She was a tough woman, 60 years old, sharp as a blade. One night, after watching me handle a rowdy table with calm efficiency, she pulled me aside. "You've got something, kid," she said, lighting a cigarette by the back door. "Most people in this business burn out. You thrive in the fire." I didn't know it then, but Rosa became my first mentor. She taught me about supplier negotiations, about keeping books balanced, about never letting a flashy trend distract from quality. When she retired 2 years later, she offered me something I'll never forget: the chance to buy her diner. It wasn't much, just a little corner place with creaky stools and peeling wallpaper. But to me, it was a palace. I scraped every penny I had, took out the smallest loan possible, and signed the papers. At 28, I became the owner of my first restaurant. It wasn't glamorous. The pipes leaked. The fryer broke down weekly. Some nights, I went home so exhausted I fell asleep still wearing my apron. But customers came, word spread, and slowly, the diner turned into a local gem. From there, I didn't stop. Every profit I made, I reinvested. I bought a struggling CAF across town, turned it around, then another. By 30, I owned 3 places. By 32, 5, I never told my family. Not a word. When Mom called, I let her believe I was still barely getting by. When Melanie bragged about her luxury vacations, I nodded silently. When Chris joked about me being a forever server, I smiled faintly. They thought I was nothing. And I let them. Because my success wasn't meant for their applause. It was meant for my freedom. And oh, the freedom tasted sweeter than anything. By the time Mom's next big birthday rolled around, I owned a chain of restaurants quietly, anonymously. I invested under shell companies, used managers as front faces, kept everything off social media. My family had no idea. Which brings us to that night, the night my siblings thought they could humiliate me one more time. The night they pushed me toward the server's table, laughing under their breath. The night they learned the truth that the very restaurant they thought would be their stage for mocking me was, in fact, mine. I didn't plan it that way. Fate did. When the family chose the venue for Mom's party, they had no idea it belonged to me. They didn't know I bought it only months before, adding it to my growing portfolio. So when the evening came, I played along. I smiled as they pointed me toward the servers. I let them smirk, whisper, snicker, because I knew what was coming. And when the restaurant owner, my manager, walked in and headed straight for me, addressing me as boss in front of everyone, well, let's just say that was the moment my years of silence paid off. The looks on their faces, priceless. But I'll get to that in a moment. First, let me tell you exactly how that birthday dinner went down. Every cruel laugh, every whispered insult, and every shocked gasp when the tables finally turned. The night of Mom's birthday started out like every other family gathering, me trying to look presentable, them waiting to tear me down. I wore a simple black dress. Not designer, not flashy, just elegant enough that I felt confident. I even brought a carefully wrapped gift, a hand-picked necklace, something subtle but thoughtful. When I arrived at the restaurant, the place was already buzzing. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above linen-covered tables. Waiters carried trays of champagne. Guests mingled, laughing, chatting, all dressed to impress. At the head of the room sat my family. Emma glowing in a red dress, Melanie beside her in glittering jewelry, Chris with his cocky grin. They saw me enter and waved, though it wasn't a warm welcome, more like a smug acknowledgement. I approached the main table, holding out the gift bag. Happy birthday, MOM. She barely glanced inside before setting it aside, her lips curling into a polite smile. Oh, thank you, dear. Then came the moment I'll never forget. I pulled out a chair, ready to sit with them. But Melanie stopped me, her manicured hand lightly touching my arm. Oh, actually. She gave a smile that didn't reach her eyes. We didn't have space here. But don't worry, we saved you a spot. She gestured across the room. There. It was. A small table near the kitchen doors, where the servers took their breaks. Napkins crumpled. Silverware mismatched. A table meant for staff, not guests. I froze. For a moment, I thought I misheard her. But Chris leaned in, smirking. Yeah. Sit over there. You'll feel more at home. The word stung like a slap. Guests nearby chuckled, whispering. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, my heart pounding in my ears. I wanted to scream, to throw the gift in their faces, to storm out. But instead, I forced a small smile. Of course, I said softly, and walked to the server's table. I sat down, folding my hands in my lap, my eyes fixed on the tablecloth. From across the room, I could hear them laughing, clinking glasses, making toasts. And every so often, I caught people glancing at me, whispering, "She's sitting with the staff." Didn't know she was working here. How embarrassing. I swallowed every word like glass. But inside, I wasn't breaking. I was waiting. And then it happened. The restaurant manager walked in. A tall man in a sharp suit, radiating authority. The room quieted slightly as he crossed the floor. Everyone assumed he was heading toward my family's table. But instead, he walked right past them. Straight to me. He stopped at my side, bowed his head respectfully, and said in a voice loud enough for the entire room to hear, "Boss, so glad you could make it tonight." The clinking of glasses stopped. The laughter died. Every head turned toward me. I looked up slowly, meeting my manager's gaze with a small smile. "Thank you," I said calmly. "I wouldn't miss it." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Chris's jaw literally dropped. Melanie's wine glass nearly tipped. And MOM looked like she'd seen a ghost. "Boss," someone whispered. "The owner," another guest asked. The manager turned to the room, his tone matter of fact. "Yes, this is Miss Reed. She's the majority owner of this establishment. Without her, none of us would be here tonight." Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. I stood slowly, smoothing down my dress, and glanced at my family's table. "Funny," I said softly. "I didn't realize seating was so limited tonight. But since I own the place." I pulled out the chair at the head of the family table, the one right next to MOM, and sat down. "No one dared stop me." The whispers grew louder, guests staring between me and my stunned family. And for the first time in my life, they weren't laughing at me. They were staring at me with something else entirely. Shock, respect, even fear. And it felt sweeter than any toast or applause, because in that moment, I wasn't the forgotten daughter, the server girl, the joke. I was the boss, and they knew it. The air in the restaurant turned heavy, like everyone was holding their breath at once. I sat at the head of the table, my hand steady on the linen, while my family gaped like statues. Chris was the first to snap out of it. He leaned forward, his voice low but edged with panic. "Wait, what do you mean you own this place? Since when?" I took a sip of water, letting the silence stretch. "Since last year," I said calmly. "I bought the majority shares. The staff you've been ordering around all evening, they work for me." A murmur rippled through the guests at nearby tables. I could see the shift in their expression, some impressed, some entertained, all waiting for what would happen next. Melanie's face flushed crimson. "You're lying. You don't have the money for something like this. You work dead-end jobs, remember?" I smiled faintly. "Maybe that's what you believed. But while you were busy laughing at me, I was busy building something real." Mom's lips trembled as she tried to recover her composure. She placed her hand over mine, her voice sickly sweet. "Darling, why didn't you tell us? We would have supported you. We would have celebrated this with you." Her words almost made me laugh. Supported me. This was the same woman who told me I wasn't cut out for success, who watched silently as my siblings mocked me for years. I gently pulled my hand away. "You made it clear a long time ago that you didn't believe in me. Tonight, I thought I'd return the favor and let you see what it feels like." The silence at the table was suffocating. Chris leaned back, scowling. "So what, you think you're better than us now? Just because you bought a restaurant?" I met his glare evenly. "No, I don't think I'm better than anyone. No, I'm not less than anyone either. Especially not you." The words hit harder than I expected. For once, Chris had no comeback. Melanie fidgeted with her wine glass, her voice trembling. You could've told us. We're family." We should have been part of this. I leaned forward, my eyes locked on hers. Family doesn't humiliate each other in front of strangers. Family doesn't laugh when you struggle, or steal from your dreams, or push you to the side at every chance. You made sure I knew my place. Tonight, I just reminded you where I really belong. The table went silent again. Even MOM queen of quick comebacks had nothing to say. Around us, the guests started clapping. A few softly at first, then louder. It wasn't for a performance. It wasn't for a toast. It was for me. For the girl they tried to bury, who had bloomed anyway. I sat tall, letting the applause wash over me, while my family squirmed under the weight of their own shame. For the rest of the night, I didn't need to say another word. Every time a waiter addressed me as Miss Reed, every time a guest congratulated me, every time the staff treated me with respect, it was revenge sweeter than anything I could planned. But deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. Because once the dinner was over, my family wasn't going to let it end there. They would come after me begging, excusing, maybe even scheming. And I was ready, because now the power was mine, and I wasn't going to give it back. The night after Mom's birthday, I lay awake replaying everything in my head. The humiliation of being seated with the servers. The way my brother and sister smirked when they thought they'd reduce me to the help, and then the shock on their faces when the owner of the restaurant bowed slightly, calling me boss. It should felt like victory, right? But I wasn't satisfied yet. That wasn't revenge, it was just a glimpse of the truth slipping out. My family still didn't understand what I'd built, what I was capable of. They still thought my success was luck, or a fluke. That's when I decided I wasn't just going to let them see my power. I was going to make them feel it. The first opportunity came faster than I expected. MOM had planned a post-birthday dinner at my sister Clara's house. I almost declined, but something in me said this was the perfect stage. When I arrived, Clara was already in hostess mode, fancy wine, glasses, a look at me dining spread, the whole works. She didn't even greet me properly. Just, "Oh, you made it. Don't spill anything, okay?" I smiled. "Don't worry, Clara. Tonight, I'll just sit back and watch." Dinner started like a repeat of Mom's birthday snide comments. My brother Mark talking about his investments, Clara flaunting her new handbag, and MOM laughing along, soaking in their fake perfection. Then Clara dropped her little bomb. "Actually, I've got some big news. I'm starting my own little side business. A CAF downtown." MOM gasped, thrilled. "Oh, darling. You always had such taste. You'll do wonderfully." Clara smirked at me. "Maybe I'll invite you to work there, sis. You'd look cute in an apron." Mark and MOM laughed, and I just sat there, letting their laughter echo. But then I leaned forward, my voice calm but sharp. "Funny you should say that, Clara. Because the CAF space you're trying to lease, it belongs to one of my companies. In fact, you already submitted your proposal, didn't you?" Clara froze. The color drained from her face. Mark choked on his wine. MOM blinked. "What do you mean?" I pulled out my phone, opening the property management portal. "See, that address is under Blue Horizon Holdings, my company. Which means if I say no, your CAF doesn't even open." The silence was delicious. Clara stammered, "You're lying. You can't what? Own the building, approve or deny tenants." "Clara, wake up. You've spent years mocking me, calling me the failure. But you've been living in my world this whole time. The restaurants, the real estate, The event spaces, you've probably stepped into my properties without even knowing it, Mark muttered. This is insane. Since when do you? I cut him off. Since I stopped trying to impress all of you and decided to build something real. Something bigger than your shallow status games. You laughed when I struggled, but while you were busy looking down on me, I built an empire. Mom's fork clattered against her plate. For once, she wasn't defending them. She wasn't laughing. She was staring at me like she didn't even recognize me. Clara tried to recover, her voice trembling. So what? You're just going to ruin me? Block me out? I leaned back, letting the power sink in. That depends. Because for the first time, the choice is mine. And in that moment, I realized something. Revenge wasn't just about striking back. It was about making them realize that every time they dismissed me, every cruel word, every laugh at my expense, only made me sharper, stronger, and now unshakable. Entitled. That word stuck. She hadn't raised me, she had belittled me, pushed me aside, and treated me like an outsider. So I made a decision, a permanent one. The next week, I threw a private event at the restaurant. Not for family, not for friends, but for the staff. My team. I called it Family Night because they were the only family who had truly stood by me. I gave out bonuses, recognized people for their work, and reminded them that they weren't just employees, they were part of my success story. My biological family. They didn't even get an invitation. Word got back to them, of course. My sister texted me angrily. So the servers are your family now? You've abandoned your blood. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. Blood makes you related. Loyalty makes you family. And you've never been either. For the first time in my life, I felt weightless, free. Mom eventually tried one more stunt. She showed up during business hours, causing a scene in the lobby. She screamed that I was ungrateful, that one day I'd regret pushing my family away. Customers were watching. Staff were uncomfortable. So I stepped out, calm and composed, and said the words I'd been holding back for years. Mom, you made your choice a long time ago when you seated me with the servers instead of beside you. You showed the world exactly how little I meant to you. But here's the irony, those servers, they're my family now. You're not welcome here. Security escorted her out. That was the last time she set foot in my restaurant. And you know what? Business flourished. The restaurant became one of the most sought-after dining spots in town. Not because of revenge, not because of the drama, but because we built it with respect, loyalty, and hard work. Still, whenever I sit at the head table during big events, I remember that night. The moment they thought they'd humiliated me by seating me with the servers, and how the universe flipped it on its head. Because the truth is, I wasn't embarrassed. I was exactly where I was supposed to be, with the people who believed in me. And now, I'm proud to be called their boss. That's the thing about revenge, it doesn't always come with fire and fury. Sometimes the sweetest revenge is living well, standing tall, and proving that the ones who doubted you were never worthy of sitting at your table in the first place. So, if you ever feel like the underdog at the family table, remember this: your worth isn't defined by where they seat you. It's defined by the table you build for yourself. And sometimes, the people they look down on end up building empires. Trust me, I know. Thanks for watching. Hoped you liked it. If you watched till the end, please comment revenge, so that we could understand you were with us till the end. As well as, please let us know, where are you watching from? What do you want to hear from us in next video? If you have any incident in your life, please let us know. We would love to share your story. Before leaving, please hit the subscribe button, comment your thought, and share with your nearest and dearest one. See you in the next one. Until to the next one, stay happy.